Story of Ruth in the Bible. Welcome back to Best Bowl Story. You'll go to our channel for captivating stories and insights from the Bible. Today, we're diving into one of the most heartwarming and timeless stories from the Old Testament, the story of Ruth. This story is not just a tale of love, loyalty, and faith, but also one of redemption and divine providence. The story of Ruth stands as a powerful example of how God can work through seemingly ordinary lives to bring about extraordinary blessings. So, sit back, relax, and let's explore the remarkable journey of Ruth, a woman who is honored in both Jewish and Christian traditions as a symbol of unwavering faith and commitment. The story of Ruth is set during the time of the Judges, a period of turmoil and instability in Israel's history, long before the establishment of the monarchy. This time was marked by cycles of sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance, where the people of Israel frequently strayed from God, only to cry out for help and be rescued by judges appointed by God. Against this backdrop of chaos and uncertainty, the story of Ruth begins with a family that decides to leave Israel due to a severe famine. This family consists of Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Seeking better prospects, they migrate from Bethlehem in Judah to the country of Moab, a neighboring region often in conflict with Israel. The tragedy in Moab. Soon after settling in Moab, tragedy strikes. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, leaving her a widow in a foreign land. Her two sons eventually marry Moabite women. Mahlon marries Ruth, and Chilion marries Orpah. For a while, life continues, but then disaster strikes again. Both Mahlon and Chilion die, leaving Naomi bereft of her husband and both of her sons. Naomi is now left with her two Moabite daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, and no male relatives to provide or protect them. This loss is overwhelming for Naomi, and she decides to return to her homeland of Judah, where the famine has ended. In her grief and bitterness, Naomi urges her daughters-in-law to return to their own families in Moab, hoping they might find new husbands and rebuild their lives. A pivotal decision. This moment marks a pivotal turning point in the story. Orpah, after much weeping, decides to follow Naomi's advice and returns to her family in Moab. But Ruth, in an extraordinary act of loyalty and love, refuses to leave Naomi's side. Ruth's words to Naomi are some of the most beautiful and powerful expressions of commitment found in the Bible. Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Ruth 1:16-17. With this declaration, Ruth pledges not only her loyalty to Naomi, but also her faith in Naomi's God, the God of Israel. Ruth, a Moabite woman, is willingly leaving her homeland, her family, and her culture to follow Naomi to a land where she will be a foreigner. It's an extraordinary act of faith, as Ruth's future is uncertain. She knows no one in Judah, and as a widow and a foreigner, her chances of survival are slim. Yet, Ruth's love for Naomi and her trust in God propel her forward into the unknown. Return to Bethlehem. Naomi and Ruth journey together back to Bethlehem, Naomi's hometown. When they arrive, the entire town is stirred by their return. Naomi, however, is bitter and heartbroken. She tells the women of Bethlehem, "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Ruth 1:20-21. Naomi's grief is palpable, and her sense of loss is profound. Despite Naomi's bitterness, Ruth remains steadfast. She takes it upon herself to provide for Naomi. And the two women settle in Bethlehem just as the barley harvest is beginning. This is significant because, in ancient Israel, gleaning was a common practice. The poor, widows, and foreigners were allowed to gather leftover grain in the fields after the harvesters had passed through. This was how Ruth hoped to provide for herself and Naomi. Ruth meets Boaz. As Ruth begins to glean in the fields, she happens upon the field of a man named Boaz, who is described as a man of standing and a relative of Naomi's late husband, Elimelech. Boaz notices Ruth working hard in his field and inquires about her. Upon learning of her loyalty to Naomi, Boaz is impressed by Ruth's character and instructs his workers to leave extra grain for her to gather. He also ensures her safety in the field, recognizing that as a foreigner, she might be vulnerable to mistreatment. Boaz's kindness towards Ruth goes beyond the ordinary. He invites her to share a meal with his workers and offers her water from his jars. When Ruth expresses her gratitude, Boaz responds with a blessing, saying, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth 2:12. Through Boaz's actions, we see a glimpse of the broader theme of divine providence at work. While Ruth's situation seemed bleak, God was guiding her steps to a place of provision and protection. Naomi's plan. When Ruth returns home with an abundance of barley, Naomi is overjoyed and recognizes that Boaz is a relative of her late husband, making him a potential kinsman redeemer. In ancient Israel, a kinsman redeemer was a close relative who had the responsibility to redeem or marry a widow to ensure that the family line would continue. Naomi, with renewed hope, devises a plan for Ruth to approach Boaz and seek his protection as her redeemer. Naomi instructs Ruth to wash, put on her best clothes, and go to the threshing floor where Boaz is winnowing barley. Ruth is to wait until Boaz has finished eating and drinking, then lie down at his feet. A symbolic gesture of requesting protection. Ruth does exactly as Naomi says, and when Boaz awakens in the middle of the night to find Ruth at his feet, she humbly asks him to spread the corner of his garment over her, a way of asking him to take her under his protection and fulfill the role of kinsman redeemer. Boaz is deeply moved by Ruth's request and praises her for her kindness and integrity. He agrees to marry her, but there is one obstacle. There is another relative who is a closer kinsman redeemer and has the first right to redeem Ruth. Boaz, being an honorable man, decides to settle the matter the next day, the redemption. The following day, Boaz goes to the town gate, where legal transactions are conducted, and meets with the closer relative. After explaining the situation, the man declines to redeem Ruth, leaving Boaz free to take Ruth as his wife. Boaz declares his intentions publicly, and the elders and witnesses bless the union, saying, "May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home, like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel." Ruth 4:11. Boaz and Ruth marry, and God blesses them with a son, whom they name Obed. The women of Bethlehem rejoice with Naomi, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel." Ruth 4:14. Obed would go on to become the grandfather of King David. making Ruth not only part of the lineage of Israel's greatest king, but also part of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Themes and lessons from Ruth's story. The story of Ruth is rich with themes that resonate with readers even today. One of the most prominent themes is loyalty. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi is profound, as she chooses to stay by her mother-in-law's side, despite the many difficulties she faces. Her unwavering commitment to Naomi reflects the importance of familial bonds and the selfless love that transcends cultural and ethnic boundaries. Another significant theme is faith. Ruth's decision to follow Naomi to a foreign land and embrace the God of Israel is testament to her faith in God's plan for her life. Despite being a Moabite, Ruth's faith was recognized and rewarded by God, showing that faith is not limited by nationality or background. Her story illustrates that God's love and mercy extend to all people, regardless of their origins. The theme of redemption is also central to the story. Boaz, as the kinsman redeemer, is a symbolic figure of how God redeems and restores what is broken. Boaz's willingness to redeem Ruth and Naomi's family line points to the greater redemption that God offers through Jesus Christ, who is also called our Redeemer. Lastly, the story of Ruth demonstrates the idea of divine providence. What may have seemed like a series of unfortunate events, famine, death, and widowhood, was all part of God's larger plan. Through Ruth's faithfulness, God orchestrated a story